Today, we're jumping right into the middle of a crisis, a story about a leader holding power that isn't really his. It's a drama that's playing out right now in the U.S. House of Representatives, and it's all about power, weakness, and the timeless rules of political survival.
So it really all boils down to this one question. What happens when a leader gets to the top, not because they're feared, not because they're respected, but just because they were, well, tolerated? That question right there is the absolute beating heart of the political drama we're about to get into.
In this whole conflict really comes down to two people. On one side, you have Speaker Mike Johnson. You can think of him as the compromise, a guy who was put in charge because his party was just exhausted and desperate for some stability. But on the other side, you've got Marjorie Taylor Greene, the catalyst, a political force who doesn't just tolerate instability, she thrives on it. To really get how we ended up here, we need to start with our first section, the Speaker on Loan. This is all about how a leader can rise to the top based on an illusion of power instead of the real thing. This gets right to the heart of Mike Johnson's problem. You see, his rise to the speakership wasn't some grand victory. It was what happened after his predecessor was publicly humiliated and thrown out. The Republican caucus wasn't looking for a powerful king. They were looking for a quiet caretaker. So from day one, his power was never really his. He was the speaker in name, but in reality, he was a hostage. And this brings us to this core idea we're talking about, borrowed power. Think of it as authority that's completely conditional. It works because people give you permission, not because you command them. And here's the fatal flaw, the real trap. It looks and feels completely real, right up until the second it gets challenged. You know, this isn't some new political invention. We were warned about this centuries ago. Niccolo Machiavelli wrote that leaders who mistake permission for real power are doomed. They always end up facing the same thing, betrayal from the inside. And what we're watching with Mike Johnson, it's like seeing that prediction play out in high definition. So that setup leads us right into our next section. The first cracks appear. This is what happens when a leader starts to lose their grip on what might be the most important political tool of all, fear. The first real crack in the dam was this pretty stunning moment of defiance. In a huge sign of weakness, you had Republicans and Democrats actually joining forces to defeat something that both Speaker Mike Johnson and Donald Trump wanted. I mean, let's be clear. When your supposed allies team up with your opponents to vote against you, you've already lost control of the room. So how did they do it? They used this wonky procedural weapon called a discharge petition. It's basically a tool for a rebellion. Here's how it works. Step 1, leadership tries to block a bill. Step 2, a majority of the members just decide to revolt. And step 3, they completely bypass the speaker and force a vote anyway. And make no mistake, every time one of these petitions gets filed, it's sending a message that is loud and crystal clear. It's basically a public announcement that says you are no longer the gatekeeper. And a speaker who can't even control which bills get a vote, well, is he really the speaker at all? You know what they say, politics abhors a vacuum. And when people perceive weakness, it creates a power vacuum that someone will always step in to fill. This brings us to our next section, Riding the Chaos, where we look at Marjorie Taylor Greene's very calculated strategy. The difference in their strategies is just night and day. Where Mike Johnson hits the brakes and hesitates, trying to calm things down, Marjorie Taylor Greene floors it and accelerates right into the chaos. For her, instability isn't a problem that needs to be solved. It's an opportunity. She feeds on it. And look at this number, 9. That is it. That's how razor-thin the margin for error is. All Marjorie Taylor Greene needs is to convince 9 other members to join her, and she can force a vote to kick the speaker out of his job. This one little number just shows you how incredibly fragile the whole power structure is. So when you boil it all down, you're looking at 2 completely different strategies of power. Mike Johnson's whole approach is based on delay and de-escalation. His currency is obedience, but his fatal flaw is that he avoids confrontation at all costs. Marjorie Taylor Greene, her currency is grievance, and her approach is pure disruption and vengeance. And in today's political world, well, her strategy seems to be the one with all the energy. Okay, so what happens when these 2 strategies collide? That brings us to our next section, the collapse from within. Here, we're going to see how dependency, isolation, and a nasty little policy trap are making the speaker's downfall happen even faster. Remember what Machiavelli said? It's the enemies on the inside that are fatal. And right now, the dissent is coming from every corner of Mike Johnson's own party. You've got his own conference chair, Elise Stefanik,
openly wondering if he's going to survive. You have other members leaking how unhappy they are to the press. His allies are starting to back away. His circle is getting smaller by the day. One of the biggest gambles Mike Johnson made was tying his own fate so closely to Donald Trump's. It's a classic political mistake, because when the person you've attached yourself to starts to look weaker, when their own pressure campaigns start to fail, well, you end up falling even faster. And if you want a perfect case study of this, just look at the healthcare trap. There are some Affordable Care Act subsidies that are about to expire, and members in competitive districts are starting to panic about how voters will react. When leadership hesitates on something this huge, panicked politicians stop asking for permission. They start looking for the nearest emergency exit to save themselves. All of this brings us to our conclusion. It brings us back to Machiavelli's final warning, a timeless lesson that's written in the language of fear. At the end of the day, power has rules, and it seems Mike Johnson violated every single one of them. Power has to be owned, not just borrowed. Loyalty has to be enforced, not just requested. Fear has to be managed, not denied. And in politics, delaying a fight is just another way of surrendering. Marjorie Taylor Greene seems to understand these rules instinctively, and she has exploited every single one of his missteps. And that's really why this whole thing feels inevitable. Power doesn't collapse in reality first, it collapses in perception. And for Mike Johnson, the fall is already complete in the only place that matters, in the minds of his colleagues. They don't fear him anymore, and they definitely don't believe he can protect them. But what's the really big takeaway from all this? This quote right here sets up the final and frankly chilling thought we need to consider. The scariest part is not that Mike Johnson may lose his job. The scariest part is that the House has learned nothing. This crisis isn't just about one man. He's a symptom of a much deeper decay, a situation where the institution itself seems to reward chaos over competence. And that leaves us all with one final, very unsettling question. In this endless cycle, who comes next? And how long can they possibly last?